Have you noticed that your legs don't feel the way they used to? Maybe your feet feel unusually cold when you're sitting in your favorite chair. Maybe your calves become tired after walking through the grocery store. Maybe your legs feel heavy at the end of the day. Or perhaps you get that strange feeling where your feet seem to be awake, but your legs simply aren't moving the way they should. And here's something important. Many people over 60 simply assume these changes are a normal part of getting older. But aging itself is not the whole story. Your blood vessels, muscles, nerves, activity level, blood pressure, blood sugar, cholesterol, and overall cardiovascular health can all influence how well blood reaches your legs and feet. And that is exactly why today's topic is so interesting. Because we're going to talk about a simple mushroom tea that contains compounds researchers are studying for their potential role in cardiovascular and metabolic health. But before you grab a mug, there is one important thing you need to understand. This is not a magic drink. There is no mushroom tea proven to instantly open blocked arteries or rapidly cure poor circulation. In fact, research on mushrooms and cardiovascular health is promising in some areas, but still limited and inconsistent in others. A systematic review found possible benefits involving blood pressure and blood lipid profiles, while concluding that the evidence was not strong enough to say mushrooms conclusively prevent cardiovascular disease. So why are we talking about mushroom tea? Because one particular type of mushroom has attracted a lot of attention, and the compound inside it may be especially interesting as we get older. It's called ergothioneine. You may have never heard that word before, but by the end of this video, you'll understand what it is, why mushrooms are one of the richest dietary sources of it, why researchers are interested in it as we age, how to make a simple mushroom tea, what you should and should not expect from drinking it, and perhaps most importantly, when leg circulation problems are serious enough that you should not try to manage them with food alone. Because sometimes a cold foot is just a cold foot, but sometimes it can be a warning sign. And knowing the difference could matter much more than any tea. Let's start with something most people don't realize. Your legs are surprisingly demanding when it comes to circulation. Every step you take requires your cardiovascular system to deliver oxygen and nutrients to working muscles. Your heart pushes blood through arteries that become progressively smaller as they travel toward your legs and feet. At the same time, your body has to return blood back upward through your veins. So healthy circulation isn't simply about having enough blood. It's about the entire system working together. Your heart, your arteries, your smaller blood vessels, your muscles, your veins, and even your ability to stay physically active. As the years pass, several things can change. Blood vessels can become less flexible. Plaque can accumulate inside arteries. Blood pressure can rise. Blood sugar can become harder to control. Physical activity can decrease. Muscle mass can decline. And all of these factors can influence how your legs feel. This is one reason why someone can say, "My legs just don't have the energy they used to." And that statement may be pointing to several completely different things. Sometimes it's simply deconditioning. Sometimes it's muscle weakness. Sometimes it's a nerve problem. Sometimes it's a vein problem. And sometimes it can involve the arteries. One condition worth knowing about is called peripheral artery disease, or PAD. PAD occurs when narrowed arteries reduce blood flow to the limbs, especially the legs and feet. According to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, a common symptom is pain, aching, heaviness, or cramping in the legs during walking or climbing stairs that improves after resting. Other signs can include a colder foot, changes in skin color, numbness, weakness, slow healing sores, or changes in toenails and hair growth. And here's the part that surprises many older adults. Not everyone with PAD has obvious symptoms. That means you shouldn't assume that the absence of pain means everything is perfect. But you also shouldn't assume that every tired or cold leg means you have PAD. That's why this video isn't about diagnosing yourself. It's about understanding what may support healthy circulation as part of a bigger lifestyle. And that's where mushrooms enter the picture. Now imagine taking a humble mushroom, slicing it, placing it into hot water, and making a simple savory tea. It sounds almost too ordinary. But mushrooms contain a collection of interesting compounds. Depending on the species, mushrooms can provide fiber, minerals, vitamins, beta-glucans, and compounds such as ergothioneine and ergosterol. And ergothioneine is particularly interesting because it isn't simply another antioxidant that happens to appear in a supplement advertisement. It's a naturally occurring compound that your body has a specific transporter for. That means your cells are equipped to take it up and retain it. Researchers have been investigating its possible role in protecting cells from oxidative stress and supporting cellular health. And there is an especially interesting connection with aging. Studies have found that blood levels of ergothioneine tend to decline with age, including after age 60. Researchers have proposed that this may be relevant to age-related health, although much more clinical research is needed before we can make strong claims about what increasing ergothioneine intake actually does for disease prevention. So the question becomes, could regularly eating mushrooms or occasionally drinking a mushroom-based tea help provide this compound? Potentially, yes. But there is a very important distinction. Providing a nutrient is not the same thing as treating a disease. And drinking a mushroom tea is not the same thing as physically removing plaque from an artery. That's why I want you to keep one phrase in your mind throughout this video. Support, not miracle. We're looking at a food that may support cardiovascular health as part of an overall healthy lifestyle. Not a replacement for medical treatment. Not a replacement for walking. Not a replacement for controlling blood pressure or blood sugar. And definitely not a replacement for prescribed medication. Now let's talk about the mushroom. If you've been expecting some rare mushroom that costs hundreds of dollars, here's the good news. You don't necessarily need one. For today's tea, we're going to focus on shiitake mushrooms as a practical food option. Shiitake mushrooms are widely available in the United States, both fresh and dried. They also contain ergothioneine, although the amount can vary depending on the mushroom species, growing conditions, processing, and preparation. And there is another reason mushrooms are interesting for older adults. They can fit into a heart-conscious eating pattern without adding much saturated fat. But we're going to make this tea differently from the sweet herbal teas you may be familiar with. This is not supposed to taste like fruit tea. Think of it more like a warm, savory broth. And that may actually be a good thing, because the goal isn't to load your mug with sugar. In fact, if you're drinking something specifically because you're interested in cardiovascular and metabolic health, turning it into a sugary dessert probably defeats the purpose. So here's the simple concept. Take a small amount of dried, edible shiitake mushrooms. Place them in hot water. Allow them to steep long enough for the water to become deeply flavored. Then remove the mushroom pieces if you prefer a clear tea. You can add a small amount of ginger for flavor if you enjoy it. You can also add a squeeze of lemon after the tea cools slightly. But don't turn this into a chemistry experiment with 10 different ingredients. Simple is better. And here's something else. If you have the mushrooms available, eating the softened mushrooms can provide nutrients and fiber that you won't get from drinking only the liquid. So think of the tea as one way to incorporate mushrooms into your diet, not necessarily as some concentrated medicinal extract. And there is another reason I don't want you to think of this as a quick fix. Circulation isn't something you switch on with one cup. Your arteries and cardiovascular system don't suddenly transform because you drank a beverage. If a person has significant arterial narrowing, a cup of tea isn't going to physically remove that narrowing. What a healthy dietary habit can potentially do is become one small piece of a larger pattern. And that larger pattern is what really matters. Regular movement, a nutritious diet, adequate sleep, not smoking, managing blood pressure, managing blood sugar, maintaining a healthy weight, and following treatment when a cardiovascular condition has already been diagnosed. That's the foundation. The mushroom is the supporting character, not the hero. But there's another fascinating question. Why might mushrooms be particularly interesting for older adults? And the answer takes us deeper into what happens inside your cells as you age. Because your body is constantly producing molecules that can damage cellular components. Your cells also have systems designed to defend against that damage. Oxidative stress is part of normal biology, but excessive oxidative stress can contribute to cellular damage. Ergothioneine has attracted attention because of its antioxidant and cytoprotective properties, and researchers are investigating whether it may help cells deal with oxidative stress. But much of the evidence remains mechanistic, observational, or preclinical rather than definitive human clinical evidence. That distinction matters, because health headlines often jump from, "This compound has antioxidant properties," to, "This food reverses aging." Those are not the same statement. And I don't want you making decisions based on exaggerated claims. Instead, let's focus on what you can realistically do. If you enjoy mushrooms, incorporating edible mushrooms into meals or an unsweetened mushroom broth can be a sensible addition to a varied diet. And if you already eat mushrooms regularly, you don't need to dramatically increase your intake just because one compound sounds interesting. More isn't always better. Your overall diet matters much more than a single food. Now, before we continue, I want you to pay attention to something that could be more important than the tea itself. If your legs hurt every time you walk a certain distance, and the pain consistently improves after you stop, don't simply assume you need more circulation-supporting foods. That pattern deserves attention, especially if you also have risk factors such as smoking history, diabetes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, or known cardiovascular disease. PAD can be associated with plaque buildup elsewhere in the cardiovascular system, increasing the risk of heart attack and stroke. And that's why your legs can sometimes act like a window into your cardiovascular health. A small change in walking ability may be telling you something worth investigating. So yes, drink the tea if it fits your diet. But don't use the tea as an excuse to ignore a warning sign. Because the most powerful thing you can do for your legs may not be sitting down with a mug. It may be getting up and moving them. And we're going to come back to that. Because there is a simple habit that works together with everything we're discussing today. And surprisingly, it has nothing to do with mushrooms. It's something you can do with your own 2 feet. And for many people over 65, it may be far more important than adding another superfood to the kitchen. But first, let's uncover exactly how to prepare the mushroom tea without turning it into a sugar-loaded drink or making exaggerated health claims. Because the preparation matters more than most people realize. Let's make this practical. If you're over 65 and you're interested in trying mushroom tea, the first rule is simple. Use edible mushrooms from a reputable food source. Do not collect wild mushrooms yourself unless you have appropriate expertise and identification. Some wild mushrooms can be dangerously toxic, and cooking does not necessarily make every poisonous mushroom safe. For a simple home version, dried shiitake mushrooms are convenient. You can start with roughly 2 or 3 dried mushrooms and around 2 cups of water. Place the mushrooms in a small saucepan with the water. Bring the water to a gentle simmer. Then reduce the heat and allow the mushrooms to gently simmer for approximately 10 to 15 minutes. You are not trying to create some ultra-concentrated medicinal extract. You're making a savory mushroom infusion. Once the liquid has developed a richer color and aroma, remove the mushroom pieces. You can drink the broth warm. And if you'd rather eat the softened mushrooms, slice them and add them to your meal. That may actually be the more nutritious approach because you're consuming the mushroom itself instead of throwing away the food after making the tea. For flavor, you can add a thin slice of fresh ginger. You could add a small amount of lemon. You could also add a little black pepper if you enjoy it. But I would avoid turning the drink into a sugary beverage. You don't need several teaspoons of honey. You don't need a flavored syrup. And you certainly don't need a powdered circulation booster mixed into it. Keep it simple. Now, there's a question you're probably asking. When should you drink it? Morning? Afternoon? Before bed? The honest answer is that there isn't strong clinical evidence showing that a particular time of day makes mushroom tea improve leg circulation. So don't let someone tell you that drinking it at exactly 7 a.m. will magically open your arteries. That's marketing, not established science. Choose a time that fits comfortably into your routine. For some people, a warm savory drink in the afternoon works well. For others, it can become part of dinner. The important thing is consistency with an overall healthy diet, not a magical clock time. Now let's talk about what you might realistically expect. You may feel warmer after drinking a hot beverage. That's normal. You may feel relaxed. You may enjoy the flavor. But that sensation doesn't prove that your arteries suddenly opened. A warm cup can make your mouth, throat, and stomach feel warm without meaning that blood flow through a narrowed leg artery has dramatically changed. That's an important distinction. If you're looking for genuine improvements in leg function, the bigger picture matters. And one of the biggest pieces of that picture is movement. Think about your calf muscles. They are sometimes called a second pump for circulation because muscle contractions help push venous blood upward toward the heart. Every time you walk, your leg muscles repeatedly contract and relax. That movement is part of normal circulation. And this leads to a fascinating idea. The mushroom tea may be the easy part. The walking may be the powerful part. Imagine someone who wakes up, drinks a mushroom tea, then spends the next 6 hours sitting. Compare that with someone who eats a balanced diet, drinks water, takes prescribed medications correctly, and takes regular walks appropriate for their ability. The second person is doing far more for their cardiovascular system. So if you're going to try mushroom tea, pair the habit with movement. Not extreme exercise. Not an hour at the gym. Not something that leaves you exhausted. Just appropriate, regular movement. For some older adults, that could be a comfortable walk around the neighborhood. For others, it could be walking inside the house. It could be several short walks spread throughout the day. If you're already active, keep doing what you're safely able to do. And if walking brings on consistent calf or thigh pain that disappears after rest, don't simply push through it. That is exactly the type of pattern that can occur with PAD and deserves medical evaluation. Now let's return to the mushroom. Why shiitake? Because mushrooms aren't nutritionally identical. Different varieties contain different combinations and amounts of bioactive compounds. Shiitake is an edible mushroom that can provide ergothioneine and other compounds, but you don't have to become obsessed with one species. Oyster mushrooms are another interesting option. In clinical research, oyster mushroom consumption has been investigated for cardiometabolic parameters, including cholesterol, triglycerides, glucose measures, and blood pressure. Some trials reported improvements in certain markers, but the evidence isn't strong enough to claim that oyster mushrooms treat cardiovascular disease. That distinction is important because you may see headlines saying, "Eat this mushroom and lower your blood pressure." That's too simplistic. The actual evidence is more nuanced. Some studies suggest potential benefits. Other studies find inconsistent results. And systematic reviews have repeatedly called for better quality research. But that doesn't mean mushrooms are useless. It means we should put them in the correct category. They're a nutritious food with interesting bioactive compounds. They're not a miracle medication. And that is actually good news. Because you don't need a miracle to improve your health. You need habits you can repeat. Think about what happens when you make one small improvement and repeat it for months. One better meal. One short walk. One glass of water instead of a sugary drink. One additional serving of vegetables. One less processed snack. One more night of adequate sleep. Health is often built from these small decisions, not from one dramatic intervention. And mushrooms can fit into that picture. Now let's talk about the compound that has made mushrooms particularly interesting in aging research. Ergothioneine. The name sounds complicated, but the basic idea is easier. It's a naturally occurring sulfur-containing amino acid derivative that comes primarily from the diet, with mushrooms being especially rich sources. Your body has a specialized transporter called OCTN1 that helps move ergothioneine into cells. Researchers are interested in this because ergothioneine can accumulate in tissues and appears to have antioxidant and cytoprotective properties. And here's the intriguing aging connection. Research suggests blood levels of ergothioneine tend to decline as people get older. One study involving adults aged 55 to 85 found an inverse relationship between age and serum ergothioneine levels. But here's where we have to slow down. A lower blood level with age doesn't automatically prove that increasing the level will make you healthier or live longer. That's correlation. Researchers still need better clinical trials to determine whether increasing ergothioneine intake actually prevents disease or improves meaningful health outcomes. So don't hear, ergothioneine decreases with age, and translate it into, everyone over 65 needs an ergothioneine supplement. That conclusion hasn't been established. Food first is often the more sensible approach, and mushrooms are one way to obtain it naturally. Now here's something I want you to consider. What if the real benefit of mushroom tea isn't one dramatic effect? What if its value is that it encourages you to build a better daily routine? Imagine making your tea. While it's steeping, you decide to walk around the house for 5 minutes. Then you drink your tea instead of a sugary beverage. Later, you eat a balanced dinner containing vegetables, protein, whole grains, or another nutrient-dense carbohydrate. You take your prescribed medications as directed. You go to bed at a reasonable time. The mushroom didn't do all of that. You did. And that's the mindset I want you to have. Don't give one food credit for an entire healthy lifestyle. Now, let's discuss another mistake people make. They think circulation problems are always about the arteries. They're not. Your legs contain arteries, veins, nerves, muscles, joints, and connective tissue. Pain can come from arthritis. Numbness can come from nerve problems. Swelling can have many causes. Venous problems can produce different symptoms from arterial disease. Even your lower back can produce symptoms that travel down the leg. The NHLBI notes that arthritis, vein problems, and nerve problems can sometimes produce leg symptoms that may be confused with PAD. Clinical evaluation helps distinguish these causes. So if you're experiencing persistent symptoms, don't diagnose yourself based on a YouTube video. Use the information to know what questions to ask. That's a much safer approach. And there is one more important point. If you're taking medication for blood pressure, cholesterol, diabetes, blood thinning, or another condition, don't stop or replace it because you started drinking mushroom tea. Food can support health, but prescribed treatment exists for a reason. And if you have a diagnosed condition, your healthcare professional can tell you whether a particular food, supplement, or herbal ingredient is appropriate for you. Now let's talk about the word in today's title that gets the most attention. Fast. Boost leg circulation fast. It's a powerful phrase, but we need to be honest about it. A mushroom tea has not been established as a fast treatment for poor circulation. If you drink it and your legs feel warmer, that doesn't necessarily mean your arterial blood flow improved. If your legs still hurt when you walk, the tea didn't solve the underlying problem. If you have a blocked artery, tea isn't a substitute for evaluation and treatment. So why use this topic at all? Because it opens the door to a much more important conversation. How can an older adult support cardiovascular health through food and lifestyle? And mushrooms are an interesting part of that conversation. But now I want to tell you about the warning signs that should change your priorities completely. Because there is one situation where you shouldn't be thinking about mushroom tea at all. You should be thinking about getting urgent help. Imagine you suddenly notice that one foot has become much colder than the other. The color looks unusually pale or blue. You can't feel the foot normally. You can't move it. Or you're experiencing sudden severe leg or foot pain. Those can be signs of an acute loss of blood flow and require emergency medical attention. The NHLBI specifically advises calling 911 for sudden symptoms, such as inability to feel or move the foot, severe symptoms at rest, or a foot that becomes paler or colder than the other. That is not a tea problem. That is an emergency. And knowing that distinction could potentially be far more valuable than knowing any recipe. So keep the tea in perspective. It can be a warm, nutritious addition to your routine. But your legs are telling you something when symptoms appear. Listen to them. Now, there is another question we haven't answered. If mushroom tea isn't a miracle treatment, what exactly should you focus on every day if your goal is healthier legs? The answer is surprisingly simple, and it starts with something you probably already have. Your walking shoes. Let's say you wake up tomorrow and decide, I'm going to take better care of my circulation. What should you actually do? First, don't start by buying 10 supplements. Start with movement. If you're safely able to walk, regular walking is one of the most practical forms of physical activity for older adults. And if you have been inactive for a long time, start small. 5 minutes. Then another 5. You don't have to complete one giant workout. Short periods of activity can be easier to fit into daily life. But again, if walking causes a predictable pattern of leg pain that goes away when you rest, get that evaluated rather than simply forcing yourself through it. Pad-related pain can occur during activity because the muscles need more oxygen, while narrowed arteries limit the blood supply. Now let's talk about sitting. Many people over 65 spend long periods sitting without realizing how little their legs move. They sit during breakfast, then in a chair, then watching television, then using a phone, then during another meal, then back into the chair. Even if you exercise once during the day, spending nearly the entire day inactive isn't ideal. So create movement triggers. Every time a commercial comes on, stand up if you're able. Walk to the kitchen. Walk down the hallway. Do a few gentle movements. If balance is a concern, use appropriate support and avoid anything that makes you feel unstable. You don't need complicated equipment. The goal is simply to interrupt long periods of sitting. And now we can bring the mushroom tea back into the story. Imagine this routine. You prepare your mushroom tea. While it is simmering, you walk around the kitchen. You pour the tea. You sit down and enjoy it. Later, you take another short walk. This turns one food habit into a reminder to move. That is much more valuable than believing the mushroom itself is doing everything. Now let's discuss another major factor. Smoking. If you smoke, quitting can be one of the most important things you do for your vascular health. Smoking damages blood vessels and is a major risk factor for PAD. The NHLBI notes that people who smoke have a much higher risk of PAD complications. No mushroom can cancel that out. No tea can cancel it out. No supplement can cancel it out. So if you're looking for the biggest possible improvement, prioritize the big factors first. Then worry about the small extras. Blood pressure is another major piece. If your blood pressure is consistently high, your arteries are exposed to increased stress over time. That's why taking prescribed blood pressure medication correctly, monitoring your pressure when recommended, and following your treatment plan matters. Again, mushroom tea can be a food choice. It is not blood pressure medication. Some research suggests mushrooms may influence blood pressure or cardiovascular risk markers, but systematic reviews describe the evidence as limited or inconsistent. So think, potentially supportive, not guaranteed treatment. Now let's talk about blood sugar. If you have diabetes or elevated blood sugar, your vascular health deserves particular attention. The goal isn't to eliminate every carbohydrate. It's to build an overall eating pattern that supports your metabolic health. Mushrooms are naturally low in calories and can add flavor and texture to meals. You can put them into soups, egg dishes, vegetable dishes, stir-fries, grain bowls, or you can make the savory tea we've discussed. But if your mushroom tea is accompanied by cookies, pastries, sweetened coffee, and sugary snacks all day, the mushroom isn't going to magically balance that out. The entire pattern matters. Now let's talk about protein. As people age, maintaining muscle becomes increasingly important. Your legs are not just transportation. They're metabolic tissue. Strong leg muscles support mobility, balance, independence, and daily function. And this is another reason why circulation and muscle health are connected. If your legs become weak, you may walk less. If you walk less, your fitness can decline. If your fitness declines, everyday activity can become harder. That can create a downward cycle. So protecting your ability to move is one of the smartest things you can do. And that means eating enough nutritious food, getting adequate protein, staying active, and addressing medical problems that interfere with movement. Mushrooms can contribute nutrients, but they are not a complete protein source on their own. So don't replace a balanced meal with mushroom tea. Use the tea as an addition. Now let's go back to ergothioneine. There is a reason scientists continue studying it. The compound appears to have properties that may help protect cells against oxidative and inflammatory stress. Some researchers have even proposed that ergothioneine could have a role in healthy aging. But the scientific story is still developing. Recent reviews describe ergothioneine as a promising compound with potential effects involving cellular protection, inflammation, metabolism, and cardiovascular biology, while emphasizing the need for stronger clinical evidence. This is exactly the type of scientific finding that gets distorted online. A researcher says, "We found a promising biological mechanism." The internet turns it into, "This food reverses aging." Those are completely different statements. So don't chase the hype. Chase habits. Now here's something practical. If you're going to buy mushrooms, look at the label. Choose edible mushrooms from a reputable grocery store or food supplier. If you're buying dried mushrooms, store them according to the package instructions. If they smell strange, show signs of mold, or appear spoiled, don't use them. And if you're using a mushroom powder or supplement rather than whole food, understand that supplements can be much more concentrated and may have different safety considerations. Food and supplements are not automatically interchangeable. This is particularly important for older adults who may be taking several medications. If you're considering concentrated mushroom extracts, it's worth discussing them with a qualified healthcare professional, especially if you take medications or have chronic conditions. But ordinary edible mushrooms used as food are a different category. Now let's talk about the actual tea again. You can make the basic version with dried shiitake. 2 or 3 mushrooms. About 2 cups of water. Gentle simmer. 10 to 15 minutes. Remove the mushrooms. Drink it warm. That's it. If you like ginger, add a thin slice. If you like lemon, add it afterward. If you want more flavor, you can add herbs such as parsley or a little black pepper. But don't believe that adding 20 ingredients somehow makes the tea 20 times more powerful. It doesn't work that way. In fact, the simpler the routine, the more likely you are to actually stick with it. And consistency beats complexity. Now let's imagine a 70-year-old person. They've started noticing that their legs feel tired. They don't walk as much as they did 10 years ago. They spend more time sitting. Their diet contains too many processed foods. They hear about mushroom tea and think, "Perfect. I'll drink this every morning." That's a good start. But if nothing else changes, the potential impact is limited. Now imagine they make one additional decision. After breakfast, they walk for 10 minutes. Then they repeat that after lunch. Then another 5 or 10 minutes later in the day. They gradually improve their diet. They monitor their blood pressure. They follow their prescribed treatment. They stop smoking if they smoke. They stay hydrated. They maintain their muscle strength safely. Now the mushroom tea has become one small piece of a much bigger strategy. That's the version I want you to copy, not the miracle version, the realistic version. Because healthy aging is rarely about one secret. It's about stacking small advantages. And there is another advantage to mushrooms that we haven't discussed enough. They can replace less nutritious foods. Think about a bowl of soup. If you add mushrooms, vegetables, beans, and lean protein, you create a satisfying meal. Mushrooms add savory flavor and texture that can make healthy meals more enjoyable. And when healthy food tastes good, you're more likely to keep eating it. That's important because the best diet isn't the one that looks perfect on paper. It's the one you can actually follow. Now let's discuss hydration. Sometimes older adults don't drink enough because they don't feel thirsty. Dehydration can contribute to fatigue and can make you feel generally unwell. Water should remain your main hydration source. Mushroom tea can contribute fluid, but it shouldn't replace the basics. And if you have a condition where your healthcare professional has specifically limited your fluid intake, follow that advice. Again, your personal medical situation matters. Now here's another thing people often misunderstand about circulation. You might see someone online recommending a tea because it makes your feet feel warm. But warmth isn't the same thing as improved arterial circulation. A hot beverage can create a sensation of warmth. Spices can create a warming sensation. Even rubbing your feet can make them feel warmer. None of those things necessarily mean that blood is flowing through a narrowed artery normally. So don't use your feet feeling warm as a diagnostic test. Instead, pay attention to functional changes. Can you walk farther? Are you developing new pain? Are symptoms getting worse? Is one foot consistently colder than the other? Are wounds healing normally? Has the color of your foot changed? These are more meaningful questions. And if you notice concerning changes, seek medical evaluation. The NHLBI emphasizes that PAD can cause serious complications, including poorly healing sores and, in severe cases, tissue damage due to inadequate blood flow. So let's make today's message very clear. Mushroom tea may be a nutritious beverage. Mushrooms contain interesting compounds. Ergothioneine is one of the compounds researchers are studying. Mushroom consumption has been associated in some studies with potentially favorable cardiovascular markers. But mushroom tea has not been proven to rapidly unblock arteries or cure poor leg circulation. And that honesty doesn't make the topic less interesting. It makes it more useful, because now you know what the tea can reasonably be. A simple food habit. A warm, savory alternative to sugary beverages. A way to incorporate edible mushrooms into your diet. And perhaps a daily reminder to take better care of your cardiovascular system. But there's still one question. If you're over 65 and you have poor circulation, what should your daily routine actually look like? Let's put everything together. Imagine tomorrow morning. You wake up. Before reaching for your phone, you think about your legs. How do they feel? Any unusual pain? Any numbness? Any major change from yesterday? If everything feels normal, you continue your morning. You drink some water. You eat a nutritious breakfast. And later, perhaps you prepare your mushroom tea. While the tea is heating, you move around. Nothing complicated. Just gentle movement appropriate for your ability. You pour your tea. You enjoy it. Then you continue your day. At lunch, you include vegetables and a good source of protein. You keep highly processed foods and excess added sugar under control. After lunch, you walk if you're safely able to. Later in the afternoon, you avoid sitting for hours without interruption. And in the evening, you take another short walk or perform appropriate movement. That's a routine, not a miracle. But routines are powerful. Now, if you want the mushroom tea itself, here's the simplest version again. Use edible dried shiitake mushrooms from a reputable food source. Put 2 or 3 mushrooms into roughly 2 cups of water. Gently simmer for about 10 to 15 minutes. Remove the mushrooms. Drink the savory broth warm. Add ginger or lemon if you like. And if you want to get the nutritional benefits of the mushroom itself, eat the softened mushrooms rather than throwing them away. That's it. You don't need a mysterious powder. You don't need an expensive supplement. You don't need a secret Asian formula. And you don't need to drink 5 cups a day. There isn't good evidence establishing that more mushroom tea produces faster or better circulation. The goal is simply to include mushrooms as part of a balanced diet. And now let's talk about frequency. How often? There isn't a scientifically established circulation dose of mushroom tea. So don't let someone sell you an exact number of cups as if it were a prescription. If you enjoy it, you can incorporate mushrooms into meals regularly and use the tea occasionally or as a routine beverage. Variety is important. You don't need to eat the same mushroom every day. You can rotate mushrooms through soups, meals, and other dishes. And remember, whole mushrooms provide more than ergothioneine. They can contribute fiber, vitamins, minerals, and other bioactive compounds. Now let's address something very important for anyone over 65. If you already take medication for a cardiovascular condition, don't stop taking it because you started eating mushrooms. If you take medication for blood pressure, continue following your prescribed treatment. If you take cholesterol medication, continue your plan unless your healthcare professional tells you otherwise. If you take diabetes medication, don't assume a dietary change makes medication unnecessary. And if you're considering concentrated mushroom extracts or supplements, discuss them with your healthcare professional because supplements can differ significantly from ordinary food. The goal is to add healthy habits, not replace proven treatment. Now let's talk about your legs. There are some symptoms that deserve attention. If you consistently develop pain, cramping, heaviness, or aching in your legs while walking and it improves after resting, that is a pattern associated with PAD and should be discussed with a healthcare professional. If one foot becomes colder than the other, if your foot becomes pale, blue, or unusually discolored, if you develop numbness or weakness, if wounds on your feet or legs heal unusually slowly, if you notice new sores, these symptoms deserve attention. And if symptoms suddenly become severe, especially sudden inability to move or feel the foot, or a foot that becomes suddenly cold and pale compared with the other side, seek emergency help immediately. Don't wait for the tea. Don't wait until tomorrow. Don't massage it and hope it goes away. Don't assume it's just aging. Get urgent medical attention. That may be the most important message in this entire video. Because the goal of talking about natural foods isn't to convince you that doctors, medications, or medical testing don't matter. The goal is to help you make better decisions. And sometimes the best decision is a healthy meal. Sometimes it's a walk. Sometimes it's quitting smoking. Sometimes it's taking your medication. And sometimes it's calling 911. Knowing which situation you're in is real health knowledge. Now let's return to the mushroom. Why does this little fungus deserve so much attention? Because it sits at the intersection of nutrition and research. Mushrooms contain compounds that scientists continue to investigate. Ergothioneine is particularly interesting because of its antioxidant and cellular protective properties. Researchers have observed relationships between ergothioneine levels and aging, but we still need stronger clinical evidence to determine exactly how increasing dietary intake affects long-term health outcomes. This is a perfect example of why you should be skeptical of extreme health claims. The science can be exciting without being exaggerated. We don't need to say, this mushroom will reverse aging. We can simply say, this food contains a compound researchers are interested in, and adding nutritious mushrooms to a balanced diet may be a reasonable choice. That's enough. Now imagine you're sitting at the kitchen table with your warm mushroom tea. You're over 65. You've heard hundreds of health tips. Eat this. Avoid that. Take this supplement. Don't eat after 6. Drink this before bed. And after a while, it becomes exhausting. You don't need another complicated rule. You need a few habits that make sense. Move your body. Eat mostly nutritious foods. Get enough protein and fiber. Stay hydrated according to your individual needs. Don't smoke. Keep your blood pressure, blood sugar, and cholesterol under control. Get appropriate medical checkups. And pay attention to changes in your body. Mushrooms can fit into that lifestyle. That's the real takeaway. Not one cup fixes circulation, but one healthy habit can become the beginning of many more. And here's a simple challenge. For the next 7 days, don't focus on dramatically changing your entire life. Choose 3 things. First, include edible mushrooms in your diet. They don't have to be tea every day. They can be part of a meal. Second, add a few short periods of movement throughout your day if you're safely able to. Third, pay attention to your legs. Not obsessively. Just observe. How do they feel? How far can you comfortably walk? Do you notice new pain? Are both feet similar in temperature and color? Are there any wounds that aren't healing normally? If something has changed, don't ignore it. That's your body giving you information. And if nothing concerning is happening, that's good. Keep moving. Keep eating well. Keep your appointments. Keep building your health one day at a time. Now, one final point about the title. Drink this mushroom tea to boost leg circulation fast. It's an attention-grabbing title. But the most important word we should focus on isn't fast. It's support. Because no responsible nutrition advice should promise that a tea can rapidly fix a vascular problem. The evidence simply doesn't support that claim. What the evidence does suggest is that edible mushrooms are nutrient-rich foods containing compounds that may have cardiovascular and metabolic relevance, while research remains incomplete and sometimes inconsistent. And that's still valuable, because food doesn't need to be a miracle drug to be worth eating. A mushroom doesn't have to unblock an artery to deserve a place on your plate. A walk doesn't have to transform your body overnight to be worth taking. A healthy meal doesn't have to lower your blood pressure immediately to be worthwhile. Your body responds to patterns, day after day, week after week, year after year. And that's especially important after 65. The goal isn't to become young again. The goal is to preserve as much strength, mobility, independence, and quality of life as possible. Your legs are a huge part of that. Strong, functional legs help you walk. Walking helps you remain independent. Independence allows you to keep doing the things you enjoy. Visiting family, going shopping, traveling, gardening, walking around your neighborhood, playing with grandchildren, going out for breakfast. Even something as simple as standing up from a chair without struggling. These everyday abilities are easy to take for granted until they become difficult. That's why taking care of your legs isn't just about circulation. It's about freedom. And if a simple mushroom tea helps you replace a sugary drink, encourages you to think about your diet, and becomes part of a healthier routine, that's a worthwhile use of it. Just don't expect it to do the work your entire lifestyle needs to do. So the next time you see a headline promising a miracle circulation drink, pause for a moment. Ask, what does the actual research show? Is the evidence from humans? Was it a controlled clinical trial? Is the effect meaningful? Or is the claim based on laboratory research? Those questions can protect you from a lot of health misinformation, and they can help you make smarter choices. Because healthy aging isn't about finding one secret. It's about understanding the basics and repeating them. Eat real food. Move regularly. Protect your cardiovascular health. Keep your muscles active. Take warning signs seriously. And use foods like mushrooms as part of the bigger picture. If you enjoy the savory taste of mushroom tea, make yourself a cup. Let it become a small ritual. As the mushrooms simmer, take a few minutes to move. As you drink it, remember that your cardiovascular health is bigger than any single food. And tomorrow, do it again. Not because one cup will magically transform your legs, but because small, sensible habits repeated consistently can help you build a healthier life. And there is one final thing I want you to remember. If your legs suddenly change, don't wait for a natural remedy to work. If a foot suddenly becomes cold, pale, or blue, if you suddenly can't feel or move it, if severe pain appears unexpectedly, that is not the time for mushroom tea. That's the time to seek emergency medical help. For everything else, pay attention to the patterns. Your body is giving you clues. Learn to recognize them. And if you found this useful, don't just remember the mushroom. Remember the bigger lesson. Your legs are worth protecting every single day. A warm cup of mushroom tea can be part of that routine. But the real power comes from everything you do around it. Your movement, your meals, your cardiovascular care, your medical checkups, your sleep, your daily choices. Because after 65, healthy aging isn't about searching for one magical ingredient. It's about making the next healthy decision, and then making another one tomorrow.